Hello, this video is for guiding you through the New England slash the Northern Colonies textbook questions. Something that I wanted to point out to you guys is that you should have a copy of your actual textbook, the printed version, the physical copy. If you still don't, you need to go to the office to pick it up. Otherwise, I'm going to show you real quickly how to get to the online textbook. It is linked for you on your Clever page. You just have to scroll down and you'll see that there's a symbol for McGraw-Hill. And of course, on your account, you might have access to the history textbook, maybe a science textbook or an English textbook. I have the different periods here, so then I could just click on my class. But you're looking for the history textbook. Okay, and it is Impact. I'm not sure if you guys have access to the Spanish textbook, but there is the English textbook there. There's an interactive edition, and then there's just an e-reader. And for the textbook pages, you're actually going to have to navigate using this table of contents. So this is chapter 2, and this lesson is about the New England colonies. So it's lesson 2. And there is a volume button here. It says read the entire page. So if you wanted this to be read aloud to you, you could. You always have that option. It does sound a little bit robotic, so I'm going to go ahead and do the reading for this time around, and then this way you guys will start to get used to the different features from your interactive textbook. Lesson 2, the New England colonies. The Pilgrims were called separatists. They wished to move to England's new colonies to establish their own lives and to protect their freedom of religious worship. But creating a new life in a new land was very hard. Without the aid or assistance of local Native Americans, more of the Pilgrim settlers may have died during their first years in Massachusetts. Our own celebration of the cooperation between Pilgrims and Native Americans is recalled in the description of Thanksgiving. I'm going to scroll down already. Seeking religious freedom. The Jamestown settlers had come to America in search of wealth, or gold. The next wave of English colonists arrived in search of religious freedom. England had been a Protestant country since the 1530s, when the King, Henry VIII, broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and formed the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. Not everyone in England was happy with the new church. Many people dissented or disagreed with Anglican beliefs or practices. Some people remained Catholic. Others were Protestants who wanted to reform the Anglican Church. Still others wanted to break away from it altogether. Some Protestants who wished to reform the Anglican Church were called Puritans. Those who sought to set up their own churches were also known as separatists. And there's your answer for the first question. Who were the Puritans and what did they want? And then the next one is coming. How were the separatists treated back in England? So I'm going to reread that for you. Others were Protestants who wanted to reform the Anglican Church. Still others wanted to break away from it altogether. Some Protestants who wished to reform or purify the Anglican Church were called Puritans. Those who sought to set up their own churches were known as separatists. These separatists were persecuted or mistreated because of their beliefs back in England. Some fled to the Netherlands. There they found freedom to practice their religion, but they had difficulty finding work. They also worried that their children were losing their religious values and their English way of life. The Pilgrims settled Plymouth. In 1620, a group of separatists decided to move to America. They became known as the Pilgrims. A pilgrim is someone who undertakes a religious journey. The Pilgrims were able to get grants of land from the Virginia Company. They got permission to settle in Virginia and to practice their religion freely. They boarded a ship called the Mayflower and left to begin new lives in the Americas. The Mayflower drifted off course on its journey across the Atlantic Ocean. The first land the Pilgrims sighted was Cape Cod, well north of their target of Virginia. It was November and winter was fast approaching. The colonists decided to drop anchor in Cape Cod Bay. They went ashore on a cold, bleak day in November at a place they called Plymouth. And in the interactive student edition, there's pictures that'll show you. There's actually Plymouth Plantation. It's an outdoor museum, and they have actors who go and they recreate things. The Mayflower Compact. This is for question number 3 on your assignment. What did the men signing the Mayflower Compact agree to do? Plymouth was outside of the territory of the Virginia Company and its laws. While they were still on board the ship, the Pilgrims signed a document that they called the Mayflower Compact. This document set up an organized, orderly government. Each signer promised to obey the laws passed for the general good of the colony. The Mayflower Compact was a key step in the development of a representative democratic government in America. And then there's a quote from the Mayflower Compact, and you can click on Analyzing Primary Sources if you want to see more. You can also click on the buttons. The Mayflower carried 102 passengers on its 2-month voyage to America. And then the next section of your questions says Native American help. What did Squanto and Samoset do to help the Pilgrims survive? Native American help. During their first winter in America, almost half the Pilgrims died. Illness, hunger, and cold took a terrible toll. In the spring, however, 2 Native Americans, Squanto and Samoset, befriended the colonists. They taught the Pilgrims to grow corn, beans, and pumpkin, and showed the colonists where to hunt and how to fish. Without their help, the Pilgrims might not have survived in their new home. Squanto and Samoset also helped the Pilgrims make peace with the Wampanoag people who lived in the area. For a time, the 2 groups lived together in harmony. In the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims included their new Wampanoag friends in a feast of Thanksgiving. New colonies. And on your paper, if you go to the middle column, it says New Colonies. Number 5, we're taking a look at how many people went to Massachusetts during the 1630s Great Migration. In 1629, a group of Puritans formed the Massachusetts Bay Company. They received a royal charter to establish a colony north of Plymouth. The company chose John Winthrop to be the colony's governor. In 1630, Winthrop led about 900 men, women, and children to Massachusetts Bay. Most of them settled in a place they called Boston. More settlers followed. During the 1630s, more than 15,000 Puritans journeyed to Massachusetts to escape religious persecution and economic hard times back in England. This movement of people became known as the Great Migration. So 15,000 Puritans went in that time period to Massachusetts. And in the textbook, the passage about Anne Hutchinson is on page 58. Here it looks like it's right here. So I'll read the Anne Hutchinson portion for question number 9. Question number 9 is asking, why do you think church leaders didn't like Anne Hutchinson leading religious studies in her home? Anne Hutchinson biography. Anne Hutchinson left England with her husband, William, in 1634 and settled in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. There, she held meetings in her home to discuss and give her views on religious teachings. Her teachings upset Puritan leaders, including John Winthrop, the colony's governor. She was charged with dishonoring the Massachusetts Bay Colony and banished or kicked out of it in 1637. In 1638, Anne and some of her followers established a settlement in what is now Rhode Island. At first, Winthrop and his assistants made the colony's laws. In 1634, settlers demanded a larger role in the government. Adult male church members were allowed to vote for the governor and for the representatives to the government. Later, property ownership became a requirement for voting. And going back to that middle column, it says, who was allowed to vote in Massachusetts, and why do you think only this group could vote? Again, they said adult male church members were allowed to vote for governor and representatives of the government, and later, property ownership became a requirement for voting, so you had to own land in order to vote. Next question. Number 7, how did the Puritans treat people who had different religious beliefs? And how did this make people want to leave Massachusetts and form new colonies? The Puritans came to America to put their religious beliefs into practice. At the same time, they themselves had little tolerance for different beliefs. They criticized or persecuted people who did not agree with their views. They strictly enforced their own religious rules. This lack of tolerance led people to form new colonies. And so people were leaving Massachusetts and moving to Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire because of the Puritans' very strict religious views and not being tolerant of other people's Christianity. The next question, number 8, is asking, how was Rhode Island colony different from Massachusetts when it came to religion? Connecticut and Rhode Island. To the west of Boston is land we now call the Connecticut River Valley. This rich land is better for farming than the stony soil around Boston. In the 1630s, colonists began to settle this area. A leader of this movement was Massachusetts minister Thomas Hooker. He did not like how Winthrop and other Puritan leaders ran the colony. In 1636, Hooker led his congregation or church to the Connecticut River Valley. There he founded the town of Hartford. Other nearby towns were soon established. 3 years later, these towns formed a colony called Connecticut. In 1639, they adopted a plan of government called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. This was the first written constitution in colonial America, for the Europeans anyway. The document described the organization of representative government in detail. Like the Mayflower Compact, it reflected a belief in more democratic principles where people had a say in the government and the laws. A minister named Roger Williams founded the colony of Rhode Island. Williams felt that the government should not force people to worship in a certain way. He also believed it was wrong for settlers to take land away from Native Americans. Forced by Massachusetts leaders to leave the colony, Williams found refuge with the Narragansett, a Native American people. They later sold him land where Williams founded the town of Providence. With its policy of religious toleration, Rhode Island became a safe place for dissenters or people who disagreed with Puritans. It was the first place in the American colonies where people of all faiths could worship freely, however they wanted to. Others followed William's example. In 1638, John Wheelwright led a group of dissidents from Massachusetts to found the town of Exeter in New Hampshire. New Hampshire became an independent colony in 1679. So in Rhode Island, they were a lot more tolerant when it came to people's religion. You could practice however you wanted to. We already read the Anne Hutchinson biography. In the textbook, it comes on the next page. Number 10, where did Anne and her followers settle or move to in order to have more religious freedom? I'm going to jump to conflict with Native Americans, and then the New England economy. We'll jump back. Conflict with Native Americans. As settlers spread across New England, they met the Native Americans who lived there, the Wampanoag, the Narragansett, Massachusetts, Mohegans, and other groups. Native Americans traded furs for settlers' goods. Conflicts arose, however. Usually, settlers moved onto Native American lands without permission or payment. Throughout the colonial period, settlers and Native Americans competed fiercely for land and for resources. And that's number 11. What were Native Americans and New England settlers competing for? Throughout the colonial period, settlers and Native Americans competed fiercely for land and for resources. Number 12 on your paper is a fill in the blank. It says Wampanoag leader Metacomet, or King Philip, made allies with other tribes. This war lasted blank months, but in the end the colonists blank Metacomet and the colonists expanded their territories. In 1675, Wampanoag leader Metacomet waged war against the New England colonies. Known to settlers as King Philip, Metacomet enlisted the help of other Native American groups. King Philip's war raged for 14 months. In the end, the colonists defeated Metacomet. The war destroyed the power of the Native Americans in New England, and colonial settlement expanded. Now, I did want you guys to take a look at, in New England, what goods were being exported. And that's this image right here. So for number 12, what goods were New England colonies producing or exporting? You see that one of the things they're trading is furs, fishing off the coast. They're producing iron resources. They're producing timber or wood by chopping down the forest. They're using that wood to build ships. They're also using that wood to build those barrels that hold alcohol. This alcohol that was popular was rum. And there's some cattle and grain that's being grown there in order to ship out to England. And you can see that there's some whaling that's done here. Whale oil was used for light, for heat. And that's all the questions for your assignment.